Nancy, how do I know what I want? Great question. I'm so glad you asked. So, it's such a loaded question, right? I mean, especially for anyone that's in their 20s, early 20s to late 20s. I hear this question over and over, especially with all my friends and, like acquaintances and colleagues, even. I feel like everyone gets to that point where they get kind of confused about what their next step is, and instead of focusing so much on what the next step is, we end up overwhelming ourselves with the question of, what do I want? And it sounds really heavy and loaded, right? Because you're thinking in terms of one and done, like this is going to be the end all be all. And the best answer I have to that question is, you're never really going to know exactly what you want until you do something. And it's a lot about building momentum. I feel like if you're just sitting here and asking, what do I want? And you haven't really like experimented and tried a lot of things, it can be really, really hard because you're just in your mind going over the same question, and your mind, the consciousness only has been expanded and exposed to the things that you've seen, right? I would say like the first step is just do something, anything, because something will lead to another. Margot Robbie actually said that in an interview, so I really love that. It doesn't even have to be like related to something that you're really, really interested in, which is, I know sounds strange, but anything will lead you to your interest. Because, for example, for me, I've been doing marketing and I've been in the arts for the past 4 to 5 years. And recently I took a jump into a completely different industry. And surprisingly, like it just helped me deepen my relationship with myself. And I've learned a lot about what I'm very interested in it through that industry, even though the industry is a bit more, is very different than the creatives. The more you do it, the more you find yourself finding new puzzle pieces that are clicking together. It's like you're just putting new puzzle pieces in place. So I'm like, oh, I really like this. And every time I'm doing the work for that stuff, I'm like, oh, I find that I'm leaning and morphing my own interest in the industry. For example, when I started my newsletter, initially I just wanted to have a place where I can show people my poems, because I wrote a lot of poems. But then the more that I was writing, I was like, oh, like poems are really fun, but I also love like putting these little reflection questions at the end to help people reflect throughout the day and throughout the week. Then the more that I was doing that, I'm like, oh, I also really like to write about just self-care in general. So I started doing more of that. And then the more that I kept doing it, the more that I realized, oh, now I want to add video. Like, you discover interests along the way, but you have to build momentum. There's no such thing as just sitting here and then just trying to have a solution come to you. I mean, it can if you meditate on it, something will come, but don't expect the answer that's going to come to be the end all be all. Most likely it's going to be the next step, right? You're going to have interests that fall into your head. Like, you can even think about it right now. Like, what is something that comes really, really easy to you that you can just talk for endless amounts of hours at a time and you won't shut up? Like, that's gonna be like your first step, right? And it doesn't even have to be the thing that's the end goal, if that makes sense. It'll lead to something else. And once this thing leads to something else, that's when you'll start building momentum, and your next thing will lead to another, and then the next thing will lead to another, and next thing you know it, you've built all of these like blocks and you put them all together, and now you have all of the interest that you've lined up, and now that's like your big overview. I wouldn't focus so much on like, how do I want this and just this. I would figure out on what blocks do I want to build, like what blocks of interest do I want to start building together. So like for me, I just knew that I wanted to write poems, right? So start there. I liked poems. And then I moved on and I was like, okay, I really like thought work and doing reflection. So I added that into the newsletter. And then after that, I was like, okay, I really want to write more about self-care. See how I put the blocks together? It's one big one big train of like individual cars of interest that I'm putting together. It's not like a truck with everything in the back, if that makes sense. I think that makes sense. Okay, well, I'm gonna leave you to it, but basically you don't have to have everything figured out right now. You can honestly just figure out what's your next block of interest that you want to pursue, and that's it. Okay, I will catch you next week, and I'll have better lighting next week. I thought it would be really cute to have like sunset light at this time, but I guess not. Okay.